Hello, GW political junkies, and welcome back. Thanks for joining us to kick off season 11 of Colonial Crossfire. The last time we broadcasted was on February 24th, just over 6 months ago. But honestly, it feels like an eternity. Over these 6 months, a lot has changed. The coronavirus pandemic hit the United States and the rest of the globe, claiming the lives of more than 190,000 Americans. Life as we knew it came to a screeching halt, especially politics. It's 2020. The year we've all been waiting for. But with Zoom rallies, virtual conventions, and socially distant news conferences, the campaign trail has taken on an entirely new look to it. But we still have an election in less than 60 days. Americans will still head to the polls or their mailboxes on November 3rd to practice their democratic right to vote. And until then, there's one thing for certain in this ever so uncertain world. GWTV and Colonial Crossfire will continue to broadcast every month to the GW community. However, things will look a little different around here. Episodes will be filmed via Zoom here from my apartment. Broadcasts will be a bit shorter, and each episode will focus on one or two topics. And we're going to be pushing out content more frequently on a bi-weekly basis. We're really excited, so let's dive right in. Joining us on the left for our first episode of the season is Louis Kahn, a junior broadcasting from Burbank, California, majoring in political science and political communication. Louis is the president of the GW College Democrats. And on the right, Alex Brandis, a sophomore broadcasting from Quakertown, Pennsylvania, majoring in history and political science and minoring in economics. Alex is the director of political affairs for the GW College Republicans. All right, so we're going to start off with our first question for our debate on the conventions. What did you think of the conventions, both the Democratic convention, which came first, and the Republican convention? Louis, how did you think your team did?
So with the Democratic and Republican conventions, I thought that there was a very stark contrast between both. I thought that the Republicans presented a very distorted version of reality. There was basically no acknowledgement of the current state of affairs regarding the coronavirus and the president's mismanagement. I thought that Joe Biden and Donald Trump contrasted their leadership styles front and center. Donald Trump with his famous line from 2016, "I alone can fix it," contrasted with with Joe Biden, who wants to listen to people. He wants to be informed. He wants to learn. He wants to talk to people across the political spectrum and really find what's best for the country. I thought that those two visions were very much on display. The contrast cannot be more clear. And I think the Democrats did a very good job at laying out their case for why Donald Trump does not deserve 4 more years in the White House, why we can't afford 4 more years of Donald Trump in the White House, and why Joe Biden would be a very good president.
Alex, tell me what you think of the conventions, both the Democratic one and the Republican.
So for the Democratic one, I think they had some good things. I think they did some really good party unity things overall, and combining both some Democratic and Republican speakers, including John Kasich and Colin Powell. But overall, I think that the Republicans really highlighted what Donald Trump had done during his time in office so far, including Natalie Harp, who was a really powerful speaker about the right to try, and that she would not be alive due to her breast cancer struggles or her cancer struggles. And she was given the right to try a non-FDA approved medicine. And I think it really, like the Republican convention really had some tight party unity ideas, and Tim Scott had some really awesome comments about racial justice and whatnot. So I think overall that the conventions were good. I personally would think the Republican convention was stronger, but that is obviously a biased piece.
All right, I want to dive into now one specific topic that was pretty center stage and important that had to do with these conventions, and that's obviously the coronavirus. There's no doubt the coronavirus drove these conventions. They were, for the most part, virtual. I mean, we went from, but there was still differences in how both sides approached it, which you both mentioned. The Democrats gave it center stage, featuring masks, social distancing, fireworks show, while the Republicans sort of tried to pin the pandemic in the past. They also then had a non-socially distant, optional mask wearing, fireworks viewing on the 4th night of the convention. So I want to ask, because the truth of the matter is the pandemic is still here, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be suppressing anytime soon. Unfortunately, we can hope so, but for the present day, it's here. Did the Republicans make a mistake by pinning this in the past and sort of acting like the pandemic didn't exist, even though it's very much so still here. Alex, we'll let you defend your party first.
I'm going to say that the Democrats did put a little bit more emphasis on the pandemic and really did try to show that the pandemic shouldn't be political and should really, like, we should follow social distancing and follow mask wearing. But I also think that the Republicans kind of made an idea that we can't always live in fear of this reopen the economy. We're going to have to go back to actually seeing people.
So I want to push back for a second here, because I don't want to get into the deep conversation about masks and about social distancing. I personally don't think that those should be political issues. But you said that the Republicans did hone in on mask wearing and social distancing. What do you make of the fourth night of the convention when they were in the Rose Garden? You had a packed group there. Some journalists said 1,500 people in that Rose Garden. Masks were optional and social distancing was not happening. What do you make of that? How do you say that they put the coronavirus on center stage and spoke about those two very important ideas when they didn't show it to the American people when they were broadcasting the convention?
I meant the Democrats had a higher idea of putting the coronavirus center stage, and the Republicans kind of almost pushed it aside and kind of tried to show that we can no longer, we're going to have to reopen the economy and such. I do wish they kind of showed.
You think it was smart that the Republicans put it aside?
I think they kind of should have at least tried to social distance and required masks. I don't think it was a terrible idea to have people in an audience, but I think it was kind of bad on a viewing side to say you don't have to wear masks and it doesn't have to be socially distanced.
Louis, what are your thoughts on this one?
Okay, well, there's a lot to unpack there. I would say that the entire Republican convention, they wish that they could have, that every day after March 12th did not exist. That was the day that everything shut down. That's the day that he gave the speech saying that he's suspending travel coming in from the European Union. And that is the day that Americans really realize we are in a very, very, very big problem. Now, the convention was going on. The death toll just crossed 180,000 people. And that's largely because Donald Trump, as he just admitted yesterday, wanted to intentionally downplay the virus. He has mocked science. He has mocked reporters in the White House Rose Garden for wearing a mask. So when we're talking about the politicization of these very, very basic things, as Michael said, it's because Donald Trump has consistently tried to politicize this virus for his own political gain. You cannot return back to normal. The economy cannot go back to normal until we contain the spread of the coronavirus. Because right now the projections say, again, the Democrats are following the science. The Republicans showed no regard for it. They wanted to pretend like what is happening in reality wasn't actually happening. The Democrats, who are listening to the science, and the public health experts say that if we continue on this course where we currently are, without laxing any more restrictions that are currently in place, just state by state, not nationally, just state, which is where Trump went wrong to begin with. But if we do not change course, we're going to have 400,000 Americans who are dead by the end of the year. And the Republicans show they have no intention of tackling this problem.
I want to move on to the next topic now. Sure. The main part of conventions is party unity. You know, we go through this cutthroat primary season where we have members of the same party going after each other. And then the convention is when the whole party can coalesce under the nominee. So I wanted to ask you both, do you think that this year's conventions achieved party unity, bringing together the coalition? I particularly want to talk about the Democratic Party. Do you think Joe Biden and the DNC did a good job of pulling the progressive wing of the party in and saying, you're part of this big tent, you're part of this team, let's go win? Do you think that the Democratic Party achieved that? Louis, we'll give you the first shot at this.
Joe Biden is a man of his own convictions. I think that Joe Biden has a very well-established worldview, and he's not going to be, the worldview is not going to be influenced by anybody in particular. However, he's willing to listen and he's willing to compromise. And we saw that with the Democratic Party Platform Committee, where the Joint Sanders-Biden Commission worked to incorporate ideas on the progressive wing, and then there's ideas incorporated on the moderate wing of the party. And it really shows that Joe Biden, as Bernie Sanders said during his speech, has been willing to listen. And as a result of that, the Democrats are running on the most progressive platform in history, and Joe Biden would be the most progressive president since FDR.
there was a little frustration that Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York only had about 1 minute to speak of the 4-night convention. She's one of the leaders of the progressive wing. What do you say to that pushback?
Look, the convention this year was very different. 2 hours of programming every night. I think that they should have given her more time to speak, because they also gave Republicans time to speak as well. I thought that AOC made a very good case for in her endorsement of Joe Biden and nominating Bernie Sanders. But it's a convention. Her ideas are heard in the platform, and that's more important to me. And I think that going forward, the Democrats have a very, very, very united front going into the general election.
Alex, I want to go to you on this question first. Party unity. How did the Republicans do, but especially how did the Democrats do with pulling in that progressive wing?
Personally, I think that Joe Biden is kind of willing to give in to the progressive side and kind of compromise anything he would have stood for initially just to win. I think that's kind of part of his idea. And I think really to say that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wanted to nominate Biden over Joe Biden kind of shows you that the progressives don't exactly agree with Joe Biden, and how that like kind of plays into it, that she doesn't exactly want Joe Biden, and that a lot of the left is kind of settling for Biden. But on the Republican side, it's kind of an idea that we're following. Yes, there's a little bit of following Donald Trump, but it's also what he's done for the country in his few years. The stock market is absolutely rallying. I mean, Obama's high was at 18 or 19,000, and Donald Trump's was almost 30,000. And before the coronavirus, unemployment claims were the lowest they've been in quite a long time. And it's really following what he's done and criminal justice reform and whatnot to really emphasize why he's worth giving 4 more years.
I see Louis waving his hand here. Louis, you want to get in here? What do you have to say?
Two really quick things. So it's customary at endorsements for the runner-up in the primary to have their name placed in nomination, and that's what she was doing. AOC has been very clear that she's voting for Joe Biden and that she's endorsed him, that she agrees in large part with his vision. She does have areas for disagreement. It's because Joe Biden is a more moderate figure in the party. And then also, when it comes to the president's accomplishments and what was on display, again, like I said earlier, you guys wish that this convention happened on March 12th before the economy fell into shambles. And the only thing that has really recovered is the stock market, but the stock market isn't really a good indicator of the nation's economic well-being when you have millions of people who are out of work, and those jobs will not exist when this pandemic runs its course. I really don't think that the vision that the Republicans were trying to push onto the American public is one that aligns with reality, for lack of a better word.
That's a good segue. That's a good segue for the next topic I want to get to. One of the main parts, again, another main part of the convention is for the parties to introduce their party platforms, to introduce the policies and plans that they want to roll out if they're able to make it to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in the next year, and what they would do over the next 4 years. Republicans approached this in a pretty unconventional way. If you'd say it was an unconventional convention, they didn't introduce a party platform. And I want to read exactly from a memo that they sent out. They said, quote, the 2020 Republican National Convention will adjourn without adopting a new platform until the 2024 Republican National Convention. Like I said, the whole point of the convention is to introduce the party platform. So I want to ask, with the absence of this platform, what does that say about the Republican Party? And quite frankly, is it still the Republican Party, or did it become the Trump Party in that moment? Because seemingly the only policy that what the speakers were saying, instead of introducing policy, is they were backing up the president, his character, who he is, what he's done, and they didn't introduce a platform. So I want to know, Alex, we'll go to you first on this. What do you make of not having a platform at a convention?
I think it was kind of a weird take. I understand that they kind of cited coronavirus concerns to not be able to meet in person and whatnot, to not release a platform. But I think it also plays into the idea that Donald Trump is a president who has delivered. And he is a president who has really said, he's gone in and he's kept his promises, and that what was in the platform, yes, he's done some of those, but what was in the platform in 2016 is what he can expand on. And while there definitely could have been edits to the platform, they saw fit that at least what was in the platform was good for 2020, and that Donald Trump can expand on those until a new platform would be released in 2024.
But especially with the coronavirus right now raging, and until we get a vaccine, which probably the health experts are saying will not happen until the end of this year or early next year, and then the vaccine needs to be replicated, and then it needs to be administered to Americans across the country. So it's a couple months until we get a vaccine to Americans. Don't you think that the party's platform should have reflected this once in a century pandemic that has already taken the lives of 190,000 Americans? Don't you think this should have been included in an official party platform?
Yeah, I definitely think it could have, but Trump is also very leaning on the states to make their decisions about how they want to handle this. And then obviously I think once a vaccine comes out, it'll be more national mandate and dispersion, but I think it definitely could have been and should have been included in a platform in 2020, but it's not like there are other things that they can also focus on while not making the coronavirus even more political than it is.
Okay, fair enough. Louis, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah. So I think that, well, first of all, the Republicans, they released a platform after the fact. It was on the Trump website, and there's just factual inaccuracies there, like covering all pre-existing conditions. The administration's in court right now trying to gut pre-existing conditions, protecting Social Security and Medicare. The president's trying to get rid of the payroll tax. Just so many falsehoods on that alone. And then there's one line here, and this segues into the coronavirus and how they didn't talk about it and what the Democrats have done differently. He says on his website, this is his plan. His plan, without any other context, is it's back to normal by 2021. What does that mean? There's been no coordinated national testing strategy. There's been no effort by this president to do anything to lead on this issue. He just keeps deferring to states. But if you're the leader of the United States of America, you're a strong leader, and these are conservative values. These are Republican values to be a strong leader and guide the United States in times of crisis. He has failed time and time again to do that. There has been no strategy, and it is an indictment of his failed leadership, and that is why there's tens of thousands of Americans right now who are dying.
Alex, I want to give you a chance to jump in here.
I think that Donald Trump has done a lot to try and help out with the efforts. He's had people go in and make ventilators continually to make sure we have enough ventilators. He brought the U.S. Comfort to New York. They converted the Javits Center into a field hospital, and the Comfort and the Javits Center were barely used. So what happened there?
Well, to be fair, what happened there was Governor Cuomo asked for them to come to the city just in case there was an overflow of patients. Thank goodness there wasn't. If they didn't have to use the Comfort and they didn't have to use the Javits Center, it means there are less people in harm's way. So it was for a precautionary measure. But carry on.
Right. I get that, but he also had those things to the states in accurate time and to get the ventilators out and whatnot to make sure that people had the best chance at survival.
Louis, I want to get you in here.
I mean, look, my governor in California has to constantly sweet talk the president to get help because he needs his own ego to be massaged in order for the president to do something. This has been a complete neglect of American citizens. Just because we voted for Hillary Clinton doesn't mean that we're not Americans. And I feel like what the president did during this convention is that you're either with me, you're a Republican, you love America, or you're a Democrat, you're part of the radical left, you're a socialist, and you hate America. And on his website, there was a survey he sent out. He said you're an American or a socialist. That's not how these things are supposed to work. He's not a uniting figure. He's driving a wedge between Americans time and time again. And it's just wrong.
I want to move on to another topic, an important topic here. Another central theme of the conventions was the fight for racial justice and the talk about the police and the recent shootings that have occurred throughout the country. And one of the way Republicans put it was they had this law and order mantra. And they say that if Joe Biden is president, the country will deteriorate to unrest with political demonstrations. They say, you will not be safe in Joe Biden's America. But we've seen Portland, we've seen Kenosha, we've seen protests go on throughout the country. And that is Donald Trump's America. So what I want to ask right now is what's behind this message? Because like what I said before, this is President Trump's America that we're looking at right now. And it seems like some of the things that he's describing are happening under his watch. So Alex, I want to ask you, what do you think is behind the president's message here? And do you think it's effective?
I think really what's behind his message is the people who are rioting and looting are people on the left for the most part, and some of it's busting Antifa and whatnot. So honestly, I think what's going to come of it is really what the Republicans should do come 2020 or 2021 when everyone's inaugurated, is that they should follow Tim Scott's Justice Act, and they should really work on citing police reform and making sure things actually happen to stop police brutality and stop these racial injustices which are causing the rioting and protesting.
But again, these racial injustices and these police shootings are happening under the president's watch. It happened just this year, and Donald Trump is president. So does this message to you make sense?
I totally get it, and I think that he could be doing more to combat and kind of create the idea of more law and order in these cities. And I think really one of the biggest ways to do that is pass police reform.
Louis, what do you think over here?
There's only one candidate has condemned violence in all forms, and that's Joe Biden. Donald Trump has not condemned far-right violence. Kyle Rittenhouse, who's 17-year-old white kid who was walking through the streets of Kenosha with an AK-47, he shot 2 people. I don't think that's law and order either, and the president not condemning it is a tacit endorsement, and really, he needs to stand against all forms of violence, not just that from quote-unquote Antifa. There was a study that was recently done about Black Lives Matter protests, and part of why I think that this president is particularly ill-suited for this is because he cast this whole movement as you just did, as a symbol of hate. They're all violent anarchists. They're all looters. 93% of all protests have been peaceful, and a vast majority of protesters have been peaceful. It's a couple people who are chaos agents who mix in with everybody else. And these people have a very ill-defined ideology. They're not leftists. They're not on the right. They're looking to cause trouble. And they did this, they did studies after the George Floyd murder, where a lot of these folks, they're part of white nationalist groups. Some are on the left, some are on the right. But the real problem is how are we going to stop it? And the ultimate irony of all this is everything is happening while Donald Trump is president. So if he wants to do something, if he wants to show, oh, give me another 4 years in office, he needs to act now. What the Republicans are proposing in terms of the policing reform doesn't do anything to solve the issue. He should actually listen to them. Joe Biden's listening to them. Donald Trump is not. He's calling them hateful.
Alex, I want to give you your thoughts.
I think that, yes, there is things he could do, but I also think he has signed criminal justice reform and releasing some nonviolent criminals and actually signing the pardon of a nonviolent criminal who was there on drug charges for life on a first charge. And I think there are things that he could do to further stop this and whatnot, but there are some issues. There are some rioters who are really causing some true struggles, and yes, it is on both sides, but a lot of it is coming from the left and in Democratic-run cities.
All right, we'll have to end our season premiere there, our first ever virtual debate. Louis Kahn, Alex Brandis, thank you both so much for joining us. We hope we'll have you back on the show soon. And when we come back, Kyle Anderson has our debate fact check. Stay with us. Welcome back. During our panel discussion, a team of fact checkers monitor our debate. Kyle Anderson is here to fill us in on what we missed. Kyle?
Thanks, Michael. Our debaters came to their desks today prepared for an active debate with very few errors. There were, however, a couple statements which merit correction. Democrat Louis Kahn stated there was no mention of the coronavirus at the Republican National Convention. Trump and other speakers did mention the virus and national recovery efforts several times during the convention, although it was significantly less than at the Democratic convention. Kahn also claimed that New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had endorsed Joe Biden. However, as of September 10th, Ocasio-Cortez has not issued an official endorsement of the Biden-Harris ticket, though she did say she planned to vote for them in November. That's all from Fact Check. Back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Kyle. All right, well, that's all for this episode of Colonial Crossfire. Be sure to check us out online at www.gw-tv.com and follow us on Twitter and Instagram and like us on Facebook. And if you have strong political beliefs and want to voice them to the GW community, please reach out to the Crossfire team via email or social media. We'd love to have you on the show. But before we go, as I mentioned at the top of the show, more than 190,000 Americans have lost their lives to the coronavirus pandemic thus far. Those are mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, cousins and grandparents, friends and loved ones. Each number in this unfathomable figure is not just a statistic, but a human soul, a name with a family and friends with whom they lived a life full of memories and stories, including my grandfather, Stanley Howard Levin. We called him Poppy. So we at Colonial Crossfire want to take a moment to recognize those we've lost over these 6 months and extend our deepest condolences to families and friends grieving loved ones. May they rest in peace, and may their memories be a blessing. For all of us here at GWTV, I'm Michael Schnell. Thanks for getting caught in the crossfire with us. Wear a mask, social distance, and we'll see you right back here next time.